Thank you. And I'm delighted to be helping out with this great online journal. And I'm also delighted to introduce my friend Majora Carter to speak with you. She is an eco-entrepreneur, a phrase that, that in many respects she has helped create. She was awarded a 2005 MacArthur Genius Award. She founded and served as executive director of the nonprofit Sustainable South Bronx from 2001 to 2008, when very few people were talking about sustainability, and even fewer in places like the South Bronx. In this role, she pushed for both eco-friendly practices, such as green and cool roofs, and equally important, really important, job training and green-related economic development for her vibrant neighborhood that was on the rise and still is. In 2003, Majora coined the term green the ghetto as she pioneered one of the nation's first urban green-collar job training and placement systems, spearheaded legislation that fueled demand for those jobs. Majora's 2006 TED Talk was one of 6 presentations to launch that groundbreaking website. Since leaving Sustainable South Bronx, Carter has formed the economic consulting and planning firm, the Majora Carter Group, to bring her pioneering approach to communities far outside the South Bronx. The consulting company has exported climate adaptation, urban micro-agribusiness, and leadership development strategies for business, government, foundations, universities, and economically underperforming communities. Majora, who grew up in the South Bronx, that's in New York, for anybody watching this on a video someplace else, received her Bachelor of Arts from Wesleyan before returning to school and then earning a master's from New York University. That's the school down in the Village. We're up here on Morningside Heights. She has an incredibly long list of awards and honorary degrees and is really one of the most interesting and dynamic leaders of the sustainability field in America. She's probably the only person to receive both an award from John Podesta's Center for American Progress and a Liberty Medal for Lifetime Achievement from Rupert Murdoch's New York Post. Now that is a trick. She
wearing an Obama pin.
Wearing an Obama pin is a good idea. She was named one of the 100 most creative people in business by Fast Company magazine. The New York Times has described her as the green power broker, and the Ashoka Foundation's Changemakers.org recently dubbed her the prophet of local. In addition to her work with her consulting firm, she hosts the Peabody Award-winning public radio series, The Promised Land, and serves on the board of the U.S. Green Building Council and the Wilderness Society. And I should say, Majora was a workshop client of ours at SEPA a few years ago, working on a green jobs project. And she was one of the few clients that came to Columbia to hear the workshop presentation. Usually we have to go to the clients. In this case, she came to us, which I always think is a nice gesture since our students have just delivered about $250,000 of free consulting work to the client. It's nice when the client takes the trip to see us. And it's really a sign of, I think, that her sense of dedication and purpose and understanding of community. And here, speaking with our students here after a long day, which I understood started around 6 o'clock in the morning, and she's now going to talk with you about some of the things that she knows better than anybody in the world. Majora.
Thank you for coming. Honestly, I was like, nobody's going to show up because it's like late, and it's you know, people have other stuff to do. But I'm really grateful here, and also that there's like people in the audience that I know and really adore, and so I'm just grateful to be here, and do absolutely consider myself both a friend of the university as well as someone who's constantly learning, you know, from it as well. But I'd love to just start this proposal, rather this presentation, you know, the way that I start most of my presentations, because quite frankly, I haven't quite figured out another way to tell this story and the path and the journey that I've been on without starting, you know, with the people who actually started it all, you know, and they are my parents. You know, they were a part, they're from South Carolina and Georgia, and they moved up north as part of that great migration of black folks, you know, that came up north in search for their better life. and they ended up in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx, which at that time was a mostly white working class community. And it was, interestingly enough, a walk-to-work community, which meant that people walked from the residential section into the industrial section where there was lots of manufacturing. And I discovered sort of recently that my neighborhood was actually officially known as Little Pittsburgh because of all the steel work that was done there, which was really interesting. Then other folks, like from down south and then later on from the Caribbean, followed suit, all in search of their own great American dream. White flight happened. The highway construction boom happened. We started thinking about how do we create not just highways to move people, but highways, frankly, sometimes just for the sake of building highways, and doing it rather badly. This one is a particular sort of sad kind of thing. This is the Cross Bronx, which was really kind of hideous because this picture kind of reminds me of this gash. And it was because it literally was placed on a pretty thriving, working class community. And many people given just a month's notice before they had to leave, their buildings and businesses. Redlining. This is not the first financial crisis that we've ever been in this country, obviously, but this one that happened in the 60s and the 70s literally created a term called redlining, where banks would literally draw red lines around areas in the Bronx or in cities around the country in areas where they were not going to make any kind of investment. So what happens, if you're not going to build upkeep, into your maintenance of a project, sooner or later it's going to fall into disrepair, and then, who knows what's going to happen. Oh, and this is around the time that I came in. I like to think of this as a very early networking opportunity of mine. I'm on the phone with Santa Claus, saying, hey, Easter Bunny says I've been a really good girl. Work with me here. But this is what I grew up with. A bunch of you are not quite old enough to remember the 1977 World Series when Howard Cosell, literally from Yankee Stadium, looked out and said, "The Bronx is burning, the Bronx is burning." That's what he was talking about. Landlords were literally torching their own buildings in order to collect insurance money because that was an easier way to get a profit, off of their buildings. And so, but it was kind of a more or less daily occurrence for a lot of us to see this, or at least sort of live with what the residue, of it all. This was also a time of some pretty severe, budget cuts within the city as well. Many of these were also our playgrounds, of our youth, and I distinctly remember that, the summer that I turned 8. The beginning of the summer, the 2 buildings on either end of my block burned down, and at the very end, my brother, who had served 2 different tours in Vietnam, had come back home only to be gunned down in the neighborhood next door to ours. So all of that to say that, this formerly thriving walk-to-work community, that held a lot of dreams and hopes, and possibility for a range of folks, literally kind of fell away into what became, a regional environmental sacrifice zone. So many of the, all the manufacturing that people used to walk to work to, became filled with these type of things, which had a pretty major impact on our health. So of course it had an impact also on the kind of economy that we had in our community as well. And it wasn't just that these type of things were not nice to be around. Of course, they had some pretty serious impacts on our health as well. We have one of the highest childhood asthma hospitalization rates. Diabetes and obesity absolutely directly related to environmental issues in a community and also how it's planned. So if you're a parent and you're feeling that your kid is going to get hit by a truck, because there's so much truck traffic going on outside, or you feel as though they're going to be breathing in even more toxins, you're probably not going to want your kid to go outside and play as much as possible. Add to that the fact that we live within a food desert, you're probably going to see increasingly high rates of diabetes and obesity, especially among kids, but you also see it also among the adults as well. But the absolute worst thing that we discovered that we had some indication of before, we just weren't able to put our finger on it, back in 2006, this illustrious university did this amazing study that conclusively linked proximity to fossil fuel emissions to learning disabilities in young kids. And so where do you find all these fossil fuel emitting sources? generally in poor communities. So you've got poor kids who are often doing poorly in school, statistically go to jail in this country. So it's like we created this really direct pathway from poverty into prison. And it just seemed deliberate in a bunch of different ways. But it was really troubling, for so many of us to sort of feel that way. But it was interesting because, I spent most of my life trying to get out of the South Bronx. After my brother died and the fires, I was just like planning my escape. Like from, someone bought me a book, with those test prep books for Bronx Science. I got in. I got into Wesleyan University. I had no idea that I would ever look back except to visit my parents. And then I got into graduate school, and I was really broke. So guess where I had to live? With mommy and daddy, and it was a horrible, horrible thing. I was just so depressed and dejected that this is why I spent all this time like leaving and trying to wash this stain of the South Bronx off of my body, and then where do I end up? But it was the most amazing thing that ever happened because I got a chance to see my community in a way that I never had before. I'd moved back in literally right at the time when the city and state were planning on building this huge waste facility, on our waterfront. They were planning to privatize waste handling in New York City in the late 90s. And that would have been really stupid. But anyway, that was their plan. And I got to see my neighborhood in a completely different way. And it was really simply that because we were a poor community of color, the city was sort of targeting these very particular places, and the South Bronx happened to be one of them. And so I got very involved in actually helping the city understand that building a more sustainable solid waste management plan for all of New York City that didn't automatically discriminate against poor communities of color was actually a smart thing for the city to do. And that was a really, really exciting thing. But to move in that kind of circle to really try to figure out how do we do this for the sake of the city, and of course also for the sake of community that has been very seriously injured in many different ways as a result of it. But what really kept me going was actually not so much that doing that battle, because it was really clear that we as a community, we did know how to fight against things, but we weren't really well skilled and versed at fighting for things. And so what really changed my life was this dog. It got her around the same time that we were fighting against the waste facility. And I was also at the same time getting these little notices from the U.S. Forestry Service, asking groups that were working around threatened rivers in America, and I was just like, why are they bothering me? Like, you can't get to the river from where I live. I mean, I knew there was a river. I mean, there was a thing called the Bronx River Parkway, so I knew that there was a river associated with it, and I saw it on a subway map. But it didn't occur to me that it was really within, like literally touching distance from where I grew up. And but fortunately, this dog, and you can tell she's not a small little lap dog, although she thinks she is sometimes. I was jogging with her one day, and she pulled me into what I thought was this major illegal garbage dump in my neighborhood that I'd walked by many times, but never ever went in. I mean, for what? But turns out that dump with weeds over my head and piles of garbage literally dead-ended at the Bronx River. And I could not believe it the first time I saw it. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were this beautiful, beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky, and the sunlight was glinting off the water, and it looked like these little gold specks flying out of the water. And I was like, I've never seen anything more beautiful in my life. And I couldn't believe that this was the neighborhood that I once hated. And as long as you ignored the garbage and the piles of it behind you, then you were totally cool. But then I realized it was time to use this as an opportunity to clean it up. And so I got that little tiny seed grant from the USDA Forest Service, and we really worked hard to create all sorts of different types of partnerships to really help make that happen. I definitely, got people both inside and outside the local community to volunteer. We developed partnerships with local businesses, and definitely even within the city and state and federal government to make sure that it happened. We phased in a really sort of rudimentary cleanup plan and just got programming on the site as quickly as we could. But then back in 2006, we got funds, a $3 million fund from the city to build this park. And it really is just this extraordinary place. We've actually won national awards for excellence in urban planning design.